Hey Phil, this is Cameron.
Hey, what's up, Cam?
Man, I gotta talk to you about something. Have you been watching the news?
Dude, what is going on? Pocket politics with Phill and Cam. Why? Why are we doing this?
I think it's gonna matter.
The only thing they want to talk about is guns and abortion.
My own views, I want to see the Republicans get away from the social issues.
I'm not saying that Republicans are idiots.
So you hear something like that, it's powerful.
As an American, I was disgusted.
You could make the argument that you're probably more in the middle as well.
I think that's just a story that somebody's telling you.
Again, well, with the facts, this is true. Everybody knows it.
What facts? What facts? Who does this hurt more, Republicans or Democrats?
Boy, I've been thinking about that.
Welcome back, everybody. Cameron, how are you doing today?
Doing well. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. Beautiful weather out here in Washington. How's the Northeast?
Yeah, weather's not bad. I mean, it was actually a pretty nice day today. So, it's full-fledged fall, so...
Awesome. Well, another eventful week. This week we have, yesterday, breaking news, a violent attack on the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi's husband. We've got more news involving the former guy, President Trump, and then a brand new English Prime Minister, Cam. How do our politics get so worldwide? We've talked about it for a couple weeks now, right?
Yep, so much to talk about.
And Liz Cheney made some surprising news this week. We'll talk about that, as well as more craziness in Arizona, more Herschel Walker allegations, and then we'll get into some Alaska news from the 49th state. Also, this week we had some big debates. Pennsylvania, the Fetterman-Oz debate, and Florida governor debate between Charlie Crist and Ron DeSantis, as well as some races. We've got Indiana's first congressional, Minnesota's second, and then I think we're just going to talk about where we sit with the midterms about 10 days away. What are your thoughts, Cam?
Yep, that is the thoughts and plans. We got a lot to talk about, but before we get started, I just want to put a plug in here for our social media. Like us, follow us on Facebook, jump in and comment on some posts. We would certainly appreciate that. Feel free to also check out our Instagram and certainly send us an email, CameronandPhil@gmail.com. So, and don't forget our website as well,
Pocketpolitics.co. Exactly. Okay. Hey, are we more likely to get on Twitter now with Elon Musk, or is that a more likely or less likely? What's your prediction for that?
Probably more likely, because I keep saying that I'm going to get us a Pocket Politics going on Twitter. So whether Elon Musk owned the place or not, I was planning on going on there. So I'll just say, just like before, I'm planning on it. So hopefully one of these weeks I can announce that we've got a Twitter going. But why don't we get started here, Phil? Let's talk about the sad news here involving the Pelosi's.
Yeah, well, not just sad, but also disturbing. So, a guy breaks into the house. I'm not exactly sure. The way it was reported, they said there was a like a safety check or a you remember what the sheriff or the police chief said? A well-being check, I think it was.
I think like a wellness check or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So I am assuming that comes because of a 911 call. The police show up. There's a struggle between two men, one being the 82-year-old Paul Pelosi, and another guy who has now been identified with a hammer. And then Paul Pelosi was violently beaten with the hammer, sent to the hospital. They are predicting a full recovery, though.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, this was horrific, horrendous. I will tell you, I was looking at Twitter accounts from a variety of politicians yesterday, both sides of the aisle. There was overwhelming support thrown out for the speaker and her husband, on Twitter, and statements. I saw statements from everybody from Mitch McConnell to, even Rand Paul had a statement. So there was quite an outpouring of support and condemnation for this. I mean, this is despicable. I mean, I get it. There are people that disagree on things. Phil, you and I disagree on, a number of things politically, but political disagreements should never lead to violence. And to be breaking into somebody's home, this guy, I mean, from what I heard about him and such, I guess he's like a QAnon sympathizer or QAnon follower, I should say. He busts into the home with a hammer. Actually, and you mentioned the 911 thing, I guess, and I didn't really read up as to how this happened, but apparently there was some kind of coded thing that Mr. Pelosi hit that keyed in the cops to get there, basically kind of covertly as to how he got the whole 911 thing going. In other words, not just standard dial 911, but there was some other type button or something, or some app or something he used. Anyway, regardless, he got him there. But yeah, this guy busts in. He's swinging a hammer around an 82-year-old guy, and he kept yelling, "Where's Nancy? Where's Nancy?" Well, clearly he's trying to get to the Speaker of the House, and yeah, this is disgusting. This is we are far better than this as a nation.
Yeah, and let's talk about this point for a second because this is exactly why we're doing this podcast, right? Is because you and I fundamentally disagree on a lot of things in the political world. And but having a civil conversation, right? Just because you don't agree doesn't mean it needs to be resorted to with violence,
Yeah,
right? I mean, this is a major problem that has really, it's flared up in the United States before. It's not the first time, but recently this flare up is starting to look like it's more and more out of control. And frankly, there's a bunch of examples of it. Some of it we'll talk about later in this podcast, but it's just unacceptable behavior,
it is. It is. I mean, it's sad. Like you said, we've seen it before. I mean, Steve Scalise getting shot here in 20, I think it was 2017. Um, that was, certainly tragic. I mean, Scalise survived, but I mean, it's just, again, people should not be getting shot when they're holding public office, right? And we've had other cases as well. I think it was, I don't know, a month, maybe 2 months ago, Susan Collins, in an interview, said, as polarized and just angry as the country's getting, she said, I think it's only a matter of time before a public servant gets killed.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that some of the rhetoric coming out of former politicians encourages behavior like this. I mean, I think if I think back hard enough to, well, I think it was January of 2021, there was like this violent political attack on our capital that was largely spurred by rhetoric from politicians, and this shit has got to stop. I mean, it's just this is supposed to be the freest nation on the planet, and we're on the verge of screwing a lot of that up because we are not willing to disagree.
Yeah, no, I agree. I
You,
mean, it's no, I agree with you on that. And like I said, I would encourage you and our listeners, right? Well, I say you if you haven't already done so, but take a look at what some of the politicians were putting out on Twitter yesterday. It's certainly worth a read, and I really do hope that people do heed their advice of let's get back to having civil conversations. I mean, I think I forget what Ted Cruz's exact tweet was. I don't want to be quoted, but he went on about having disagreements with a lot of people, but we should never ever be resorting to violence. And yeah, I mean, there were several of them on there that are worth a read from people on both sides of the aisle. Uh, Nevertheless, I guess the one bright spot out of this, Phil, you mentioned it, was the fact Mr. Pelosi is supposed to make a full recovery. But I will say this, the guy's 82 years old, and having been beaten with a hammer and I think he's got a broken arm. At 82, I can't believe the guy's going to heal incredibly fast. So I would imagine he's got a slow, long recovery ahead of him, wouldn't you think?
yeah, I think so. And there were pictures of the plane, flying his wife home. So she and it one I don't know how many kids they have, but one of the sons was there, Paul Pelosi Jr. And gave some comments on the recovery. But yeah, they had to do like some emergency surgery on his skull. Thank goodness for modern medicine that we're able to pull stuff like this out.
Yep.
With that being said, I guess we transition from rhetoric and the former president talking about stuff like this to his news this week. So Bob Woodward, the famed reporter who had multiple interviews with the former president, basically came out and is putting all of the tapes into an audiobook.
Yeah, it's like 20 different interviews that he's got, or 20 different tapes basically comes together into this audio book. I think it's going to be a good audio book. I think it's going to be well worth listening to. You mentioned Bob Woodward. I mean, I think he's, forever seared into people's minds from his whole Watergate, right? And his reporting. I mean, he kind of rose to prominence with that. And ever since the era of Watergate and Richard Nixon, he's been like a political staple.
He's our generation's Edward R. Murrow, wouldn't you
Yeah,
say?
yeah. And so he's the guy, right? That's sitting there interviewing Trump and all these different things. And again, I haven't listened to the audiobooks, but it sounds like there's some, definitely stuff worth listening to coming out of this. I mean, there's stuff in there about, or allegedly there's stuff in there where Trump's talking about COVID and how he, you know, didn't want to let the public know how potentially bad it could get because he didn't want to stoke fear. And then, you know, Bob Woodward mentions that numerous times Trump was kissing up to him in these interviews, trying to, I guess butter him up to have favorable press coverage from Bob Woodward. So, yeah, I think it's going to be well worth listening to. Phil, are you planning on getting this audiobook?
Yeah, I am. I've never gotten an audiobook. I'm kind of a fan of the tangible book format, if you want to call it that. But I'm gonna figure out a way to get it and listen to it because I think it's gonna be really good. Now, some of this stuff is already out. I've got a couple of Bob Woodward books on my shelf as it stands. It looks like this could be its own bombshell. Whether or not anybody gives a shit, I have no idea. But it looks like this thing is pretty bad optically for the former president. But then again, there's been plenty of things that have been
Well,
pretty bad
I was
for him.
I was going to say, Phil, whether people care about the book or not, if nothing else, it'll give you a audiobook to check out and be your first audiobook experience.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. In other Trump news, he was deposed this week. The jury selection was completed in what people think is fairly fast time. For his fraud case, and not his, but his company's fraud case in New York. Yeah, so there's definitely more to that to come. But the one other thing that I wanted to talk about was Fonnie Willis's investigation in Georgia. And basically they've got the special grand jury in Georgia, and a lot of people have said she's got enough evidence to put this thing away, but they've basically stopped and waited till the midterms. But they did come back and basically rule that Lindsey Graham has to testify for the phone call that he made to Brad Raffensperger, at the time the Georgia Secretary of State. And he made an emergency appeal. Well, just like in Florida, in Georgia, that appeal goes to the 11th Circuit, which is governed by the Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. And Clarence Thomas put a temporary stay. Now, the Justice Department or the special grand jury had to make an argument by yesterday, and I have yet to hear what the results of that are, but I'm assuming Clarence Thomas is going to take this up yet again. He will probably maybe defer this to the full court. We don't know. What are your thoughts?
Hard to say. I mean, just like all this other stuff, hard to say. I mean, I don't want to say that. I mean, I'm tired of talking about Trump, but I mean, I think I kind of speak for a lot of people that this news is just so draining with him, and I'm just sitting here every week saying, you know what, just make a move or don't. Like if you've got smoking guns, then go get the guy or don't. But I mean, we'll see. We'll see what
Yeah,
comes out of this.
I mean, I kind of agree with you. I'm a little tired of talking about it too. The problem is it keeps making news every week, and I think it was probably a month, somewhere between a month and 2 months ago, we were talking about, hey, we're not going to have this topic every week. But yet look at us now.
It is, yes. It's every week. It's the ongoing thing. I remember back in the summer when I was talking about Trump running, and you're like, "Oh, I guess we got to talk about him." But yeah, it's funny how this is morphed now. He's every week. It's almost like we just have the Trump updates every week.
Yeah, we should make that like its own segment where
We
we,
should. We should get some music behind it or something and make it like the
we
Trump updates.
yeah, we do parting shots, and then every week it's just your latest Trump update for people that want to stick around and and hear about it. But all right, well, moving internationally, we've got a well, not we, but the United Kingdom has a new prime minister, Richie Sunak.
Yeah, Rishi Sunak. Yep. And I think he's an interesting person. I mean, he's a young guy, Phil. This guy's only 42 years old. Youngest prime minister they've had since 1783. That's wild. Smart guy, right? I mean, he's done well for himself. He's got an MBA from Stanford. I think his undergrad is from like Cambridge or something. A lot of experience in financial things. Hedge fund executive guy, was working at Goldman Sachs. Got a pretty impressive pedigree. It's also worth mentioning too, let's not forget, this is the first prime minister of Indian heritage. What I think is interesting too is, you know what watching this whole thing develop and such, and listening to the folks out of the UK, they talk about how this guy's had a calming effect on the country, right? Whether you like him or not, or you agree with him politically or not, just overall the vibe over there, they already feel calmer. They have faith. I say they. A lot of people over there have faith in his financial background. Apparently, the markets have already started to stabilize, so that's a good thing. And I'm hoping that our friends in the UK can actually keep a prime minister for a while this time. And it looks like this guy will be set up to stick around for a while.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned, you say our friends in the UK, but it is important mentioning that they are probably our main allies in the world.
Oh, sure.
So it is very important for us and our kind of global positioning, or whatever you want to call it. It's very important for us as a country to have the UK strong and stable as well. So good for him. He comes in again. You mentioned, the first prime minister of Indian descent. Again, he's a member of the Tory party, as most prime ministers for the past hundreds of years have been, basically. But good luck to him, and hopefully he does good stuff over there.
Yeah, absolutely. Phil, why don't we come back to the United States though now? We had a bombshell this week with Liz Cheney. I mean, I wasn't sure if hell was freezing over this week or pigs were flying or what was going on, but Liz Cheney is going to endorse a Democrat. How wild is that? That's why I say I wasn't sure if hell was freezing over, because the fact that Cheney is going to endorse a Democrat blows me away. But Liz Cheney has come out and said she's going to campaign for Alyssa Slotkin out of Michigan. She's running for the 7th district seat up there. She's trying to hold her seat, actually. But isn't that wild? A Cheney endorsing a Democrat.
Well, I think to an extent it is wild, but I think it's also expected. If you flash back again a couple of months ago, we talked about Liz Cheney, and I think she is slowly shifting and positioning herself for her future. So I think this is another move in the direction of Cheney 2024. This is her kind of shifting on what she recognizes as not just the difference between left and right, but right and wrong. And I think it's a good move, honestly.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's important to note. Cheney said, and friends of hers have said, she hasn't changed her political feelings, right? She's still a conservative, but she's doing what she feels is the right thing to do. And so, yeah, like I said, she's getting involved in this pretty tight race up there in Michigan, a race that is being called a toss up. So, Cheney's hoping she can get in there and help Representative Slot can hold her seat. She has said that her opponent is Tom Barrett. Cheney's words, not mine, but Cheney has said that Barrett is an election denier. Um, I say her words, not mine. I haven't done enough research on this Barrett to really fully grasp, a lot about him. But she feels strongly enough that against the guy that she's going to go up there and campaign. So she's got a she's got a whole new leadership pack going though, and it's important for people to remember Cheney at the end of the day. Yeah, she got beat pretty bad in Wyoming, right? She got primaried out, but she still has political connections and she still has money in the political circles, and so that helps her get this leadership pack, which she's calling the Great Task Pack, off the ground. Phil, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, yes. So she's done it, and just like you and I both said, it's less of a move from right to left and more of a move from wrong to right. She gave a bomb interview on Sunday on Meet the Press. I mean, it was incredible. And then she's also advertising in places that she thinks she can make a difference. So, she stepped in and gave an endorsement in Michigan, and her ad that was released, it's going to be released next week, I think, to play in Arizona, where she basically slams Republican candidates in Arizona for not, accepting legitimate votes and results of elections. Should we just go ahead and play the ad?
Yeah, let's play that ad.
I don't know that I have ever voted for a Democrat, but if I lived in Arizona, I absolutely would. You have a candidate for governor, Kari Lake. You have a candidate for Secretary of State, Mark Finchem, both of whom have said that they will only honor the results of an election if they agree with it. And if you care about the survival of our republic, we cannot give people power who will not honor elections. We must have elected officials who honor that responsibility.
And there you go. So that is the advertisement that is going to be start airing on Monday, I think you said.
I think it's Monday. Yeah, it's going to be basically broadcast across Arizona, but that's a pretty powerful ad. I mean, she's going right for the heart of Kari Lake out there, and
Well,
her
and Mark
sidekick.
Fincham.
I was going to say, and her sidekick Mark Finchem. So she's really going at him. But you know, I got to be honest with you, Arizona's got its plenty of wackiness going on out there. I mean, I can see why Cheney's waiting in on that one because, man, that place is like the Wild West. And, that which kind of leads me into my next thing about this whole guarding of ballot boxes out there in Arizona. I mean, there's like
Yeah, so yeah,
vigilantes camped out by these ballot boxes.
yeah, they're sitting out there in their trucks, and I certainly don't want to pick on anybody that drives a Nissan truck. But the clip that I saw is like these two guys getting out of a Nissan Frontier, and they're masked up, and they got their bulletproof vests and or tactical vests on, are armed to the teeth, sitting out there just like stalking drop boxes. And we mentioned this last week, but I don't know. For a tough guy out of Arizona, like, don't you picture like a white Silverado or an F-250 or something, not a
Not the Nissan.
not the Nissan Frontier. And
Yeah.
full disclosure, I drive a Tacoma, so I'm not too far off from that. But
Well, I have a Silverado, so I'll just throw that out there. But
yeah, I'm just saying
but
it's a little bit. It's not quite as it's not quite as bad as a Nissan. I had a buddy who told me he's like if you get a I can't remember exactly what he said, but he gave me shit because he was basically like, he's like, it's one thing to go to a Tacoma, but he's like, if you ever buy a Nissan, I'm not going to be your friend anymore.
well, I will say, regardless of what they're driving, though, I mean, these guys are out there, uh, sitting there camped out at these boxes. I mean, it's not every single ballot drop box in Arizona, but there's a few of them, and you know, we should also mention, by the way, that these ballot boxes that they are guarding, if you will, they are under 24-hour camera surveillance. So, not exactly sure what all extra security they're adding, but they are certainly dug in there. This has been called for by some various people in Arizona, politicians. Probably the one calling out the loudest is our friend Mark Finchem, also affectionately known here on Pocket Politics as the Mustache Phil.
The mustache, yep.
Yeah, he makes another appearance yet again this week, and Did you see Phil? He's basically putting out on like his social media, get out there and guard these boxes and such. I mean, what are your thoughts on? I know we've talked about this guy before, but like, I mean, is this guy just going full on off the deep end here? What's going on with the mustache?
What you mentioned, right? I think it's Arizona state law that says these drop boxes have to be under 24 hours surveillance,
Yes.
video surveillance, that is.
Yep.
But him and then several other politicians in the state, at the state level, not at the federal level, have kind of told people to get out there and watch for ballot mules, which is probably inspired by this Cash Patel documentary that's been debunked several times. I just don't know what this does for them other than trying to intimidate potential voters. I
Yeah. I
mean,
mean, that's what I mean, that's what it looks like here. I mean, if they want to just watch him, I mean, how about just sit in your car from afar, grab a set of binoculars, or maybe get close enough you don't need the binoculars, but do you really have to be in tactical gear, bulletproof vest, yielding, various weapons, and then have like masked faces and everything? I mean,
how about get a fucking life?
yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, this looks like this is ripe for violence out there, and I yeah, I mean, Arizona is one of those states where, kind of like the Trump news, I feel like every week we could just almost have an Arizona update. Kerry Lake has been all over the news. The mustache has been out there too. I mean, they've been really campaigning hard, trying to get as much media attention as they can get. Kerry Lake's race, she looks like she's ahead pretty good. Fincham's race, though, on the other hand, that Secretary of State race is really, really tight out there in Arizona. So definitely, all eyes are going to be on Arizona in the coming weeks. But I mean, Phil, is this just going to be like a reoccurring thing now? The crazy Arizona update.
It might as well be. Maybe we stack that after or before Trump updates, but we just make it a regular weekly segment.
We'll
Hey,
give it.
it
We'll
just
give
gets
it.
crazy.
I was going to say we'll give it its own music as well.
I don't know. A judge ruled this week after a lawsuit was filed that, like, okay, the rules still are you can't be within 75 feet of the drop boxes. So as long as they stay outside of the 75 feet range, they're not. It's not unconstitutional. So I can't disagree with that argument. It just seems absurd that this is what is going on in this state in the country.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
speaking of news. Speaking of news, though, I was going
well, hold
to.
on. I don't want to like not mention this, but I will just say that a lot of this is most likely spurred by election conspiracies and denial of the last presidential elections results. And keep in mind, both Kerry Lake and Mark Fincham, just like was mentioned in the Liz Cheney clip that we played earlier, have basically denied the fact that the last election was valid. But I don't think it's in the past. And there are 199, just one less than 200 election deniers, like self pronounced election deniers running for office somewhere in the country this year. And the numbers probably actually could be more. We just don't know. But Cameron, they're all Republicans.
Yeah. Well, let's speak. Okay. Mark Fincham and Kerry Lake are a little over the top. Now, I will be honest with you, several of these, as they are called, election deniers, are people that simply raise suspicion about the last election, but they have not run around and called people to arms like Mark Fincham has been doing. I don't think it's fair to lump all these Republicans in with Mark Fincham. Mark Fincham is a member of the Oath Keepers, and we could go on and on. A lot of these other people are not taking it to that extreme. So I
I'm
don't
not. I'm
think,
not saying they're taking it to that extreme. I'm
and I
just
don't think
saying.
they should all be labeled election deniers. Some of them raised questions, but yeah, they have not caused this kind of trouble. I think.
No, I'm not saying they're all election deniers. I'm saying there are 199 election deniers.
But even those are not
Clear.
all. They are not all election deniers. They had raised some of these people because I looked this up. Some of them raised objections, or maybe not objections, but had some suspicions. But they're not all in the category of Carrie Lake and Mark Fincham. They are the extreme ones here.
So are they standing in between the two tents?
You know, I will say this: if you're talking about the 210s, the 310, whatever you want to talk about with the Republican Party, I'll say there's extremists. There's a far left, far right on each side. You know, you've got both of our parties, right? Whether it be the Republicans or Democrats, have the far sides, the far right, the far left. I'm not going to sit here and go along with all Republicans, even though those that are a little further right than maybe your more mainstream ones that are all election deniers and are doing what's going on in Arizona. I don't think that's fair to lump them all in with that.
Well, no, I don't think it is either. That's why I said there's two tents in the Republican Party.
Yeah, and there's 2 tenths in the Democratic Party. Actually, there's several tenths in the Democratic Party, but
Oh, brother. I think, aren't we the big tent party? You guys are the two tent party. That's what we've officially labeled that on this podcast before.
I don't. Well, we'll see after the midterms, but I think you're going to be we're no longer in power party, but moving. Why don't
Okay,
we move
we'll
down-
get to that later. We'll get to that later.
Let's get down to Georgia though, with a guy who, speaking of being in the news, can't seem to get out of the news. Honestly, Herschel Walker, and I'm going to be honest with you, I heard about this now, the second woman coming forward saying that he forced her into having an abortion back in, I think it was 1993, early 90s, I guess. Yeah, I heard it and I'm like, oh man, what's next? I mean,
Yeah, yawn.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, the other thing is, I mean, this woman comes forward. I'm not trying to doubt her, but I mean, she does come forward 2 weeks till election time. She's got Gloria Allred representing her. I mean, I don't want to doubt the woman, but I mean, you got to admit the timing is a little suspicious here.
Yeah, she's got James Comey timing. That's what it is.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to doubt the woman. And to be honest with you, there's probably others out there. And I almost feel like with Herschel Walker, like this is just a ticking time bomb. Each week we're going to have some new allegation come out with this guy.
Yeah, I mean, does anybody not think that he's a bad candidate? Like, I'm pretty sure everybody knows he's a terrible candidate and he should not be a member of the Senate. The problem is it's just like that, you know, I think we mentioned it last week, just like the that conservative radio host mentioned. It's okay, we just want to take control of the Senate. Like, you know, there's clearly no standards. I mean,
it's,
you know, we found some poor candidates on the Democratic side, but guess what? They have yet to make the news, with the exception of one. You know, from what, North Carolina, I believe, or South Carolina.
I mean, there's some bad candidates too. They're just not getting the press time. They're also not probably being as bombastic as somebody like Herschel Walker with some of the stuff he's doing. So,
and they're not in as big of races. I mean, but at the bottom line, Herschel Walker's a shitty candidate. This makes it even worse. Nobody gives a shit. We'll see how the votes turn.
I don't think this latest allegation, I don't think changes really anything with that race. People have their minds made up. Georgia's going to be a tight race. We'll be certainly talking more about that in the next couple of weeks.
All right.
But as far as political stuff and being in the news, I want to go up to the 49th state and give it a little love here. Phil, let's talk about Alaska for a minute, shall we?
That's exactly where I was going. I wanted to mention, too, did you know there's more commercial airline flights in the state of Alaska than the entire rest of the country combined every single day?
Doesn't surprise me because a lot of travel up there is done by airline.
Yeah, I just thought I'd mention that. Not to distract you from the political environment. Let's go.
So some news this week. Couple different things came out of Alaska. So they've got their governor's race going on, and one of their candidates for governor, Charlie Pierce, up there, he was sued for sexual harassment by one of his assistants, or a former assistant, I should say. And so he's involved in a four-way race up there. Let's not forget, Alaska has their ranked choice voting. So Pierce is running against the current governor, Mike Dunleavy, who's trying to keep his seat. There's a Democrat on the ticket, Les Gara, and then an independent, Bill Walker. So it's a four-way race, which is how these ranked choice voting set up. But this made Mr. Pierce's running mate so upset, she just dropped out. And she's like, yeah, this Edie Grunwald, I think is how you say her last name. She just straight up dropped out and said, I'm going to encourage any of my followers to vote for Dunleavy. So that was pretty crazy. She just walked away. She's like, yeah, I cannot support a guy who is has this kind of work climate, sexual harassment, and all that. So that being said, Pierce is not getting out of the race. And even if he dropped out, his name would still be on the ballot. So definitely
Yeah,
some.
we're too close to the midterms,
Yeah,
so
we are. So like it or not, he's going to be on that ballot. Also up there, though, the Alaska GOP voted to censure Mitch McConnell because he's supporting Lisa Murkowski in their Senate race. And again, it's a four-way Senate race up there, Murkowski being the incumbent and the big name in it. But there's also a Trump-backed Republican in there, Kelly Shibaka. And yeah, so because McConnell is not throwing his love at this Shibaka lady, but rather at Murkowski, there's Republicans across Alaska upset. And so McConnell is facing censure up there. So yeah, what do you think? All that stuff going on in Alaska?
yeah, I just don't know that it does a lot. I mean, it made a couple of headlines earlier this week. Um, does it do anything? No. I mean, people at this point are have shown us that they are fully willing to deal with sexual assault and harassment allegations. I don't know. It's
What?
like we're potentially going to elect a guy to the Senate that threatened to kill his family. So I don't know why Alaska should be unique in this.
Yeah, I don't think it changes a whole lot up there. I will say though that I do think Alaska is kind of interesting with that ranked choice voting. They've also got a competitive House race going on up there too. Let's not forget Sarah Palin. She's back in the race, right? So she's
Yeah, I mean, it's weirdly competitive because she's already lost that race once.
well,
But who knows? I mean,
she did lose it once, but remember, if you going back to this summer when they had the special election, there was that whole thing where she had told her supporters not to mark off a second option, because that's how that ranked choice voting works, right? You rank your candidates, and she told her supporters don't vote for anyone but me. And so
yeah.
supposedly a bunch of her voters didn't vote for other people. There's a whole bunch of drama out of it. But with all of that being said, we're not going to know who wins Alaska until later in November. But because
Yeah,
they
and
have
we
to fly in all these ballots, it takes till like the end of the month before they actually announce who wins their races.
yeah, we've talked about that before, but just to be clear, Peltola is like vastly up in the polls. I mean, there's fairly recent polls that have Peltola up by 12, 13. Some numbers have her above Palin by 20 plus points. So I don't know that this is that close of a race.
Well, yeah, we'll see. I mean, it is that ranked choice thing, so there's like four candidates in there. So yeah, we'll see. It'll be fun to watch that one. But speaking of watching, we had a chance to see some debates this week, and the big one I think that we all wanted to see was coming out of the state of Pennsylvania, and
Yeah, so the heroic stroke survivor going against the hack doctor supplement salesman Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania.
well,
Without
okay,
getting too much I know. I knew you weren't going to like that, but
well, no,
without
I
getting too much into that take, what are your overall thoughts on the debate?
yeah. So my overall thoughts on the debate is this: I mean, Fetterman looked rough, like he did. Okay, now I've also read that, Fetterman, even prior to his stroke, supposedly has never been a very good debater. Some people are good at it, some people aren't. Supposedly, that's not one of his strong suits. It was not a good look for the guy. I mean, this is a guy who, as recent as 2018, said he doesn't support fracking. And then when he was pressed on the issue, he just shook his head and said, I support fracking. And they're like, well, what changed made you change your mind? And he just kept saying, I support fracking. I support fracking. Um, but Oz had a rough look too. His
I
abortion comment was rough as well. And so,
Yeah, I would argue that Oz's look was worse just because of the fact that that Fetterman is still jumping some cognitive hurdles.
Well, yeah,
Um,
but I mean, Oz
I
looked far better in the debate. I mean, to be
yeah, but
fair, Doctor,
he's
he
a career
exactly.
TV host.
Let me finish. He looked far better in the debate because exactly he is a polished television guy. Um, and so I will tell you the reason I think the fracking thing matters is because that's one of the things that's hurting Fetterman now in the polls. He's trying to, overcome his past endorsement of Bernie Sanders and such in a state like Pennsylvania, where, you know, at the end of the day, it's a purple state, right? And so you got to have some moderation to win up there. And he's trying to pull himself into the middle, and it's tough based on past comments he's made. But I will say this: I do give the guy credit for walking out there having had a stroke just a few months back. I do. I give him credit.
Yeah, and
And as I
in all fairness, he sorry to cut you off, but in all fairness, this was a no-win situation for him, right? You were a couple months off a stroke, and you have to go out there and debate, which is keep in mind, even if you haven't had a stroke, a debate is a difficult thing to do. Was that a better decision than not debating?
Yeah, so
I think so. I
here's
think
what
it
I was
was.
here's what I was going to say. It was maybe a no-win situation. I actually think he may come out kind of a winner out of this because I think for that 5% or whatever of Pennsylvanians that are undecided, I think they saw that guy go out on the stage and try and give it his all. And I think they watched probably commentators afterwards heckling a guy who'd had a stroke and all this. And I think there's some sympathy that got shot his way. Now, the vast majority of Democrats watched it and their mind didn't change. The vast majority of Republicans watched it, minds didn't change. But I think with those undecided voters and those, handful of swing voters that are up there still, trying to figure out who they want to vote for, I think he may have made some inroads. And so I actually think that while his answers were rough, I would actually say pretty bad. I think he overall had a good look that night in the debate. And I say good look, just kind of a, symbolic look of this guy out there trying to struggle through past health issues and whatnot. So, I mean, that's where I think it went. I think it actually may not hurt Fetterman all that bad.
Yeah, I don't think it does. And also this week the Oz campaign released an ad just kind of like highlighting some of the cognitive issues that he's had when publicly speaking since the debate. And I think that almost works against him. I don't this is one of those weird things where, granted, I like Fetterman. I think you like Fetterman. I think we both agree that him and his campaign have ran an amazing campaign.
I don't.
Yes, is it?
I'm not a Fetterman fan. I at all. I just think I give him some credit. I don't like his positions. I think the guy's way too far left to represent Pennsylvania. But which is another thing for Dr. Oz. You don't need to attack the guy and his what happened to him with his stroke.
Well,
Fetterman's
but
policies
here,
alone are Oz can eat him up all day long in his policies. He does not need to punch below the belt on the guy with his health problems.
yeah, but here's where I was going with that is that, and I didn't mean you liked Fetterman for his policies. I just think you like the guy and recognize that he's like a down to earth human and he's running a really good campaign. Because we've talked about this off the air several times. What I'm saying is that I think Oz's campaign is doing him a disservice. I think he could be way ahead had they not taken the approach that they're taking. They've basically been a step behind the Fetterman campaign the whole way. And while they are tightening in the polls, it's they just haven't taken an approach that I think was good to win a candidacy.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, Oz came in this thing with his own host of issues. And like I said, I think Fetterman's got some far, far left policies that just will not go over, or I don't think go over very well in Pennsylvania. And again, I think he had plenty to argue with and plenty to shoot down Fetterman on without having to punch him below the belt. All the momentum is on Oz's side. I just think because he's surging up in the polls, but I do think I think Fetterman gained a little ground maybe the other night with the independents, just showing that he's trying to fight out there. But we'll see going
Yeah,
forward. I mean,
the polls don't reflect that well, but again, the polls don't vote, so we'll see. I mean, now speaking debates, there was another big debate this week between the Florida governor candidates, the incumbent Ron DeSantis and the challenger Charlie Crist. I was a little bit disappointed with this one, Cam. I just, we've got a clip to play. We'll play it in a second, but I just felt the same way about this as I felt about the debate, the Senate debate in my state. It was just like more of the same. All the Republicans are using the same talking points.
that
We'll
are
get
working,
into
that are
well,
working, by
we'll
the way.
we'll get into the okay. I gotcha.
Ron
We'll get into
DeSantis is
that.
killing this guy.
I mean, we'll get into that later, but I just I'm just disappointed in the quality of the debate. It's the same way I felt about Pennsylvania. It's the same way I felt about debates last week. The quality of the debates overall are not that good. Some of it has to do with the rules too. I think I mentioned this last week, but wouldn't you like to hear a guy, instead of getting 30 seconds to talk about how he feels and believes about a topic, to get maybe 90 seconds or 120, 2 whole minutes to talk about something, instead of just this quick fire back and forth, slam the other guy, bring up crime and inflation, bring up, whatever. I'm not thrilled with the format, and I'm not really seeing that debates are. I'm
As
just thinking this year they're not as good as they have been in
as
the
far
past.
as far as pure debaters go, I haven't seen that many actual great debaters. I mean, honestly, probably one of the better debaters that I've seen this year walk out on stage has been Evan McMullen out in Utah. That guy is a solid debater.
I would agree. I would say Tim Ryan did a really good job. Um, Again, the Tim Ryan, the Ohio debate, the format I didn't really like so much. So that kind of screwed it for me because I thought that they weren't given enough time to talk about what they needed to talk about. But
I mean, this Florida
well,
one it was kind of a back and forth thing, but I mean, DeSantis is killing this guy. What's he up, 12, 13 points, something like that? I mean, Charlie Crist is he's slipping every week in the polls. I didn't get much out of this debate, really. I mean, it was kind of, like you said, a back and forth and throw some mud, you know, get off the stage, go back to campaigning, have a nice night. That's kind of what I got out of this one. I mean,
yeah, I will kind of say though that the one thing that Charlie Crist did well was he picked on DeSantis for some of his policies, that was just making decisions that are purely political,
yeah,
and not necessarily beneficial. But
And
we've
DeSantis.
got a clip for it. Let me
I was
just
just
play
going to
the
say,
clip real quick.
I was just going to say, DeSantis, I think, defended himself pretty well this night.
Okay, either way, let's play the clip.
And let me remind the viewers, he wouldn't even answer you if he would stay 4 years if you reelect him as your governor. You're running for governor. You're asking them to vote for you for governor. At a minimum, you ought to be able to tell them if you get reelected, you'll serve as governor. Ron?
Well, listen, I know that Charlie's interested in talking about 2024 and Joe Biden, but I just want to make things very, very clear. The only worn out old donkey I'm looking to put out to pasture is Charlie Crist.
That was pretty much though the summary of the debate. Was there a clear winner in the debate, Cam?
I mean, like I said, I think Governor DeSantis defended himself pretty well, but you know, I don't know. I mean, clear winner, hard to say. A lot of mudslinging. Yeah, that's kind of par for the course for almost every debate we've had this year. And again, I don't think it changes much. I think DeSantis is going to run away with this one.
Yeah, I mean he's up double digits in the polls. The aggregate has him at 9.9 up, so I think he wins. At the end of the day, we'll go back to this. I think I remember. So I had this argument with you months ago, but I think you told me, and we'll have to go back and listen. Don't quote me on this, but that DeSantis was more vulnerable than Abbott in Texas. And I'm just going to reassert my position on that Abbott is way more vulnerable than DeSantis.
Well, I will tell you that Abbott's going to destroy his guy too. So that neither one of these are races. Governor DeSantis, Governor Abbott,
Okay.
But you know what? Speaking of races, or why don't we, I say swing down, why don't we swing into some house races here? I've got a couple of barn burners here that I want to talk about really quick. And the first one is Indiana's first congressional district. Phil, you heard anything about this one?
Yeah, just a little bit from you, my
Yeah.
friend.
Well, there's a Mervin that's the incumbent up there, Democrat. He's running against a lady named Jennifer Ruth Green, and Miss Green herself, an Air Force veteran. Um, she is trying to be, if elected, she would be, I should say, just the second black woman in the U.S. House of Representatives, and so she is really fighting in this one. It's been given a toss up rating. So a lot of eyes are on it to see if the Republicans can actually flip this long held Democratic seat. It's hard to say. There's not a lot of polling in some of these House races, but regardless, it's a competitive race up there, and it's one that I think people should probably keep an eye on. So we'll see if in Indiana this you know the Democrats can hold their seat there or not, but I will shift into a second race here, and that's Minnesota's second congressional district. And there are all eyes on this one from a nationwide perspective. It's a rematch from 2020, and that's Angie Craig, who's the incumbent Democrat, versus Tyler Kistner. So Craig won it by 2 points 2 years ago. Right now, she's up by one in the polls, so it looks like it's going to be another one of those finishes. It comes down to the wire. Kistner's getting attacked on abortion by Craig. I mean, go figure. Abortion seems to be big in many of these debates and in many of these races. But she's really slamming Kistner, saying he's been all over the map on abortion. Kistner has kind of jumped around as some other candidates have this year. So a lot of eyes on that second congressional district up there in Minnesota also. So
Yeah, hot off the press in May, Mervin was up by 7 points. Who know? Just who knows? It's a house race again. Some of these house races don't even get polled.
yeah,
Um,
it is. We'll
we
keep an eye on them.
Yeah, but this leads me to ask you. So I know we've kind of talked about it throughout, but where does this say we sit with the midterms as a whole? Is this a bloodbath, or is it pretty reasonable? Do the Democrats do they hold the Senate? What do you think?
So I think, as far as this goes, well, I'll start with the House. Like most other people, right? I think the Republicans are going to, take back the House. As far as how many seats, I mean, obviously that remains to be seen, but I would guess probably somewhere in the range of, they're up by maybe 20 or so seats when the dust all settles. The Senate, a little tighter, but I think the Republicans are going to take the Senate as well. I can see the Republicans taking it. I'm not as confident as I am in the House, though, by any means. And a lot of things can go a lot of different ways with the Senate race. I'll be honest with you. Um, I think it's going to come down to states like Pennsylvania and Georgia. Um,
Yeah, are you? Let me ask you: are you trusting the polls too much?
well, maybe. I mean, to be fair, maybe I am. But Phil, what else do I have to go on right now? I so the other thing that I am kind of trusting, and I guess this does tie into a poll, but when I'm hearing voters interviewed and I see polls on what matters to voters, it's always, number one is always economy slash inflation, and then number
Yeah.
two is
Okay. Real quick.
crime. So
I know.
I
So let
just,
me stop you on that real quick because I think this is a little unfortunate, right? Um, because I agree with you that inflation is at the top of the mind of most voters right now, right? But I think it's a little deceptive because I think most voters in the country, and not to be insulting, but most voters in the country look at inflation like dogs look at fireworks, right? They're like, wow, that's crazy and that scares me, but I don't understand it at all. And I don't what did the Republicans said they were going to do about inflation?
so I want to go back to your point, right? You're right. Maybe people don't understand it, but guess what? We look to the person in charge,
Yeah, but
and
what are
that's
Republicans saying they're going to do to change it?
they're saying plenty. Do I have a whole list of talking points in front of me that the Republicans are saying? Look, no, I don't. I don't have a
I
whole
don't
list
need a
of
whole
talking.
list. I just need one. I have heard
So,
no single proposal other than
but
cutting Social Security, which I don't even know if that's a proposal to fix inflation, but they're talking about cutting Social Security.
Phil, let's go back to the question you asked as to who's taking the Senate. It doesn't, we can sit here and say, well, what are the Republicans' plans to fix it and whatnot? Going back to your question, whatever they're doing is working. I mean,
But
and
okay,
that may sting you, but it's working. Like
no,
it is,
it's working for elections.
they are surging in the polls. And that I
It's
want to go
working for
back.
elections, but it's not working for
Okay.
the people of the country.
Again,
What
whole nother
what have
debate.
Republicans?
Whole no, no,
What
hang
have
on. No,
Republicans?
stop, please. That's a whole nother debate. Okay. I want to go back to the question you asked me, and how do I see these elections going? And again, I see, like I said, with the Senate, I think whatever the Republicans are saying is clearly working. I mean, and again, I don't have a list of their talking points in front of me, but they are going all in on economy and inflation right now. I mean, actually, a few weeks ago, I read off a whole bunch of their points, right? When we talked about Kevin McCarthy unveiling his new plan, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, but those,
But,
come on, man. That was
so,
like,
but Phil,
those were
but
so
Phil,
general. They didn't specify
you,
any
you,
actual work.
but Phil, you have to accept reality. The country is not happy with President Biden and their policies. I say they're the Democrats' policies right now. They just aren't. And the midterms are
Well,
going to be, I think the midterms are going to be a referendum on that. I know
in
that.
all fairness, 45% of the people who still have landlines are happy with the president's performance.
So what? So you just, I mean, do you think the Democrats are somehow going to take the Senate and hold, or I should say, take the House or I should say, hold the House and hold the Senate?
I think so, yes.
You think they're going to hold both?
Okay, I will give you the House. I don't think they're going to hold the entire House. I think they're going to give up their majority. Um, but I think the Senate is a done deal. I think they've got the Senate.
So let me ask you
Um,
this. Let me ask you this. I want to hear your breakdown on how you think, and I'm not trying to pick on you with this. I'm just very curious how you think they're going to take the Senate because I'd like to hear that.
okay, so here's what I think. I
Yep.
think we've got okay. Let's look at all the close races we've got. We've got Nevada, which is virtually even.
Okay.
That's a throw it to the wind, and whichever side the feather lands on is going to be how that turns out.
Okay.
We've got Georgia, extremely close, within the margin of error. We've got Pennsylvania, extremely close within the margin of error. We've got Ohio, again within the margin of error. We've got North Carolina, that is close, but not as close as the others mentioned, and Wisconsin that is very much the same, as well as Arizona. And I think those are the ones we're all kind of looking at, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I was going to toss New Hampshire in there too, but I'll throw my 2 cents in on this one. I think
Well,
I
real quick, before can I give my sense
Oh yeah,
before you
go ahead.
toss in your
Yep.
two?
No,
Okay.
no, go ahead.
So I think with all those being said, what we're seeing with early voting numbers and voter registrations post Dobbs is not being reflected accurately in the polls. And I do think that the Senate is a lock for at least a +2 for Democrats. And I'll stand by that. At least a +2 for Democrats. So I think we're going to look at 52-48. Not really because the independents are in there. I get it. But
Okay.
so I think that's where we sit. The House, I'm not so confident in. But a lot of that is because, again, we just talked about this. We can't get those numbers from the House. Now, this week, the Cook Political Report, I think they updated to like a +12 to +25 in the Senate, or in the House, I mean. I don't think it's that grim,
Yeah. Well,
right?
that goes along with my prediction of I think I said 20.
Yeah. Now, with that being said, keep in mind, we've talked about this before. Those are two completely different things to judge, right? Because the Senate is a statewide race, the House is not. That's one of the reasons why the House is so much harder to kind of like visualize, and also like districts have changed since the last election. I don't even really know. Like,
Yeah.
I don't
So
think Lauren Boebert is going to be in the House anymore after this year, but we don't have any data on that really. So
there's been some data on hers. I mean, but
there has been a little bit, but what I'm saying is it's not plentiful and good. It's not like what we get with some of the other things. I mean, think about it. We get a weekly general poll. We get like 100 data points from that general poll that comes out weekly. We get relatively little from house races all
well,
over the country.
so it's important to keep in mind too that midterms are usually seen as a referendum on the sitting president, and so regardless of which party the president represents, right? They usually do poorly in the midterms, right? I mean, it is considered a referendum on their performance, right? Regardless, like I said, of what party they represent. But going back to the Senate, I disagree with you on some of those seats. I agree with you that they're all really close. But I think I see the Senate playing out a little bit differently. I think Nevada, I agree with you. That's a toss up. Um, Arizona, I think Kelly pulls it out, but barely. New Hampshire seems to be getting all of a sudden hot, but I
Can
think,
can we just can we just agree that we don't know what the fuck is going on in Arizona right now?
yeah.
Like, I mean,
but
I'll
going,
just that's the one race that I'm like most confident while being least confident in. You
yeah.
know,
Well, New Hampshire, I think is an interesting, intriguing one, but I think Georgia's going to go to the Republicans. That's a red state. Let's not forget that during the 2020 elections, right, when those were those runoff races for those Georgia Senate seats, like let's not forget Donald Trump was basically telling Republican voters in Georgia, stay home, go vote. The voting is all rigged. It's not going to count. So, I mean, you had low Republican turnout for those, and two Democrats squeaked by. I don't see it happening again. I think Warnock loses his seat to Walker. I think Pennsylvania, I'm going to be honest with you, I think Oz is going to beat Fetterman. I think Fetterman is, like I said, I think he looked okay after that debate the other night, the sympathy thing, but at the end of it, I think he's too far left. He's too much of a progressive for mainstream Pennsylvanians. His past comments on fracking and I mean, Pennsylvania is a big energy state. Uh, they're not going to get behind statewide. I don't think they're going to get behind a guy like this. And he's just got too many connections to Bernie Sanders and whatnot. I think he goes down. I think Tim Ryan's going to fight hard, but I mean, Ohio's a red state. I think he's going to go down to JD Vance, although I think that one's going to be really darn close. Um,
yeah. I mean, Ohio's. You say Georgia's a red state. Ohio is very, very red. I
you
mean,
know,
way
but
redder than Georgia.
But you know what's funny though? I agree with you. Ohio's a pretty darn red state, but their other senator's a Democrat. I
I
mean, so
know,
so somehow
but
Ohio elects
statewide,
them. So I mean, I
statewide, they're 12 points
I know.
Republican.
I know. I'm not disagree with you on that, and I think JD Vance wins it, but I think it's going to be a slugfest. So I didn't even do the math with what my predictions were there, but I think I've got the Republicans up a seat or two based on my ramblings there. But yeah, I think it is. I think the Republicans are going to take both of them. It sounds like you sort of agree with me on my House prediction and
No, I
disagree on my
don't.
Senate.
I don't even disagree with the Cook political report. I don't think it's going to be 12 seats. That was their minimum. They said 12 to 25. I don't think it's going to be that much. But again, that's based on just intuition. I have no real clue. So with that being said, I mean, I'm just kind of throwing it in the wind because I don't really know. Maybe that's the Democrat optimist in me, you know. But
I
I do think we're going to hold the Senate. I mean,
What's interesting though is that I do think we maybe are going to see some split ticket kind of uh, results, and I say that because some of these governor races I think are I'll use Arizona for example, right? Carrie Lake's up a pretty good chunk in the polls, and all indications are she's going to win the governor's seat out there, whether people like her or not. Like I think she's probably going to win. And I know Liz Cheney's fighting her, but I don't think it's going to matter. I think she's going to win out there. Then I look at the Senate race, and I think Masters is going to win the Senate. Or I'm sorry, not Masters. I think Kelly's going to win the Senate. So, I mean, I think you're going to see in like a state like Arizona, I think you're going to see a Democrat win the Senate. I think you're going to see a Republican win, win the governor's seat. Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah,
Shapiro's up.
might be the same. Yeah,
Well,
where
I was going to
it's
say, yeah,
Democrat.
because Shapiro's up quite a bit on Mastriano in the governor's race. Like, I mean, I think Shapiro's going to beat him probably by 10 points. And I just, you heard me earlier call Oz. I think Oz is going to win the Senate debate. So I think we're going to see some split ticket race. Georgia could be similar. Like I said, I predict Walker's going to win down there, but Kemp's up by a lot on Abrams in the governor race, right? So I mean, it looks like
Yeah,
definitely going to be Republican there,
but
you
keep in
know,
mind, we could see the same thing in Ohio. I know you don't agree that Tim Ryan's going to win, but we could see the same in Ohio with DeWine winning by 20 points and Ryan narrowly scraping the Senate seat.
I will say this: I think Ryan overperforms. Now, I know you're probably going to push back and say he's been overperforming all summer, and you're not really wrong when you say that. I think he may overperform on election night. I don't know if I want to go so far as to say he beats J.D. Vance, because I mean earlier I said Vance wins it, but I think Ryan's gonna just fight to the bitter end, and I think that one's gonna be a dog fight. I could see Ohio being one of those states where it takes them 3 or 4 days to call it because it's so super close, and all this comes from a race that 6 months ago no one thought was going to be all that competitive.
Yeah. All right.
So
Well, with that being said, we're getting close to wrapping it up. Please, to our listeners, go out there, check us out. Link to our social media from pocketpolitics.co. You can go there, find out all about your two favorite podcast hosts, myself and Cameron, and then also link to our social media and see all the content we put up on Facebook, Instagram, and potentially in the future a Elon Musk owned Twitter. Parting shots. What do you got this week?
I just wanted to plug this one really quick because it's not a race that is really being talked about much. I mean, it's certainly not a lot from the mainstream media, at least, but I want to go to the state of Iowa. Okay. And I say that because Chuck Grassley, you know what? He's getting fought pretty hard up there by Franken. So, Mike Franken's putting up a fight. I think that one's going to be closer than people are predicting. Now, I think Grassley wins it, but I think Franken is, I think it's going to be close. I think, here, I'm not the only one apparently that's a little worried or that thinks it's going to be a close race. President Trump or former President Trump is going to be up there on the ground campaigning. Now, think about all the states that could use Trump right now. And granted, he's going to kind of fly around to several, but he's choosing to go to Iowa as well. And I want to say he's going to be in Iowa right before the midterms themselves. I think within a day or two of the midterms. I may be wrong on those dates. Don't hold me to it. But bottom line, Iowa's competitive. Don't overlook that, people. Check that race out. Chuck Grassley, Mike Franken being the retired vice admiral out of the Navy. Man, I tell you what, that's a race that probably should get more love from the pundits. So, yeah, that's my parting shot, folks. Check it out.
Hey, I'm never shying away from an opportunity to say go Navy, stay Navy, vote blue 2022, Mike Franken. I'm on it. So I did mention I'd heard about it in a couple different podcasts this week. For me, I'm going to go international. Cameron, do you know what's starting in November?
What's that?
The midterms.
I was going to say midterms. We got trapping seasons opening up in November. There's a lot opening up in November, but go ahead. I don't think that's what you wanted to talk about. So
it's not. I wanted to go towards the World Cup. So a Winter World Cup this year, but for us Americans, we refer to it as soccer. But the biggest sporting event that happens in the world every 4 years is going to start in November. Normally it happens in the summer, but this year we get a wintertime one because it's being held in Qatar. So obviously it's hot there, so they have to wait for things to cool down so that they can play these events. I'm going to go ahead and make some early predictions. Um, and I know you and most of our listeners probably don't care, but I do because it's a huge event. One, I predict, unfortunately, that USA, who is in it this year, will not make it out of the group stages. So I think they're going to play 3 games and be out, which is sad. They just drew a really tough group this year. They've got to play England, they've got to play Ukraine, which surprisingly is on a huge boost lately and has been overperforming in a lot of their games. And so I don't think we make it out of the group. However, I'll just say it right now. We can come back to it in 2023 when it's all wrapped up. But I think France wins for the second consecutive World Cup. But please, deep down in your heart, root for Team USA. We've got a very young team. We've got this young group of players coming up. Fantastic group of guys playing around the world professionally. And I do think that in the next, so 2026 and 2030, the USA is going to have a real good team. I just think we're a little young, a little inexperienced, and this is our shot to give the young guys their first big showing. So hopefully they defy that and actually make it out of the group stage. That would be great for us and our support for the sport.
Well, I always.
With that being,
I was going to say I always root for American teams, so of course I'll root for the USA.
Great. I appreciate it. I will be behind them too. I just think France is going to take it again. They're tough. They won it overwhelmingly last World Cup. With that being said, it's time to go for the week.
Alrighty, yeah, it's been a great one.
All right, well, until next week, hopefully we can maybe get a week without Trump news. We'll see.
All right, yeah, until next time.
All right, bye.